welcome to episode 200
Yay.
of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
I am full.
Oh, so am I.
We had a cake
given
to us by one of our listeners.
One of our Patreons, Vedran, thank you so much.
Thank
Big
you.
shout out to you. Sent us a bumpy cake.
A Saunders bumpy
A
cake.
Saunders bumpy cake, which I think is that a native?
That is a
Michigan native delicacy over here.
Yes.
So it is like a chocolate ganache over chocolate cake. But the reason they call it bumpy cake is because they put these thick ribbons of white cream over the top, and then pour the ganache, so it
you
leaves
get
like
little,
speed bumps,
like moguls. Yeah.
Those little speed bumps on the top. So hence bumpy cake. And man,
to
it
celebrate
is
our 200th.
so good. He gives a little 200 candles.
Yes,
to
which was
put
lovely.
on top of it. So
we'll post some pictures here soon enough.
yeah, you guys will see those up on social media pretty
But,
soon. But
yeah,
man, we are fat. We are sugared up.
Yes.
We are full. We are happy.
Yeah.
We are ready to go. We are in our 200th episode.
Did you think we'd get this far?
I don't. You know
what? I'm going to go down to the question that got asked about this because it was. I think it was. Knox
in the Box,
yeah. Let me get all the way to. But geez, you wrote a lot today.
I don't know that I thought we'd get this far, but then again, I don't know that I made a prediction of how far we would go. You know.
So the question was, how do you think this podcasting journey has shaped you, either as a player, a DM, or a person? How specifically do you hope it helps others? Let's take the first one. I think that's a good opener for the show.
Well, I think the biggest impact on me that I've noted is that it's the whole reason why like reading is exercise for your brain, is that staying in with the RPG crowd and staying apprised of different game systems, different ways of looking at things, and every single week we do an episode looking at a different aspect of the hobby. And that's just constant exercise for me.
Yeah.
And we're always doing something different. And so, I think in teaching the game to others through 200 episodes of this now, I feel like I've grown a lot personally because I've thought about different situations and different outcomes and different aspects of the game that I never would have looked at before, but I had to write a 45-minute episode about them,
Yeah, and in a way that other people would understand.
Exactly.
Which is much harder, even.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely taught me a lot, but because of teaching everyone else.
Yeah, I think for me, I had my mind kind of set on, like, where I thought systems were at, and that where the camps of people sat as far as what systems they play and how they played it. And now I feel like I've kind of gone through the college of game mastering. Like I went through middle school, of game mastering, and grade school of game mastering, where in playing games where like, I know the basic arithmetic, I know the odds of the dice, and whether or not I should be doing one thing, and the ethics of playing a character who's, rule stacked in a certain direction versus, just a total narrative character, and I used to actually say that it felt like juvenile gaming, and then as you game more with groups, you kind of mature into it. But it's more really like a wine. It ages.
Yeah.
And in that it changes, it alters. Port is a great example of that. You mix two things together, and at the beginning you can taste the difference. And after 40 years, it's a whole nother thing. But like going through the podcast, like I have an appreciation for a lot of systems now that I didn't before. I have appreciation for how they presented them. I think just that simple line of games teach you how to play them doesn't just mean mechanics.
Yeah.
It used to in my headcanon. It meant that, oh, this person's trying to tell us that this game is about tactics because you have finite amount of hit points, or this game is trying to teach us that it should be played in a narrative sense because you're growing away from or towards your class or abilities. But the narrative sections teach a lot more of that, or don't, depending on what the game is. Like in some cases, it's very blatant that the narrative is just setting. They're trying to make sure you understand the setting.
Yeah.
Whereas other ones, it's like, we're not giving you the setting. We're giving you basically a bunch of ideas to create a setting, but we're concreting those ideas so strong in your mind that you can't not create your setting. We're giving you every opportunity and every clue to spark your mind and draw you further into creating this world. To the point where some games almost like egg you on, like, hey, you want to run me? You don't just want to play me, you want to run me, don't you? Yeah, yeah, just a couple tables. Gets you right in. Just a few of these tags. Look, you made a whole world. You want some NPCs? It's just a couple steps away. Uh-oh. Now you're running a game. See, There it goes. And I like that. It's funny, but that's kind of where things are at. It's exciting. Like, I like doing system spotlights with you. I think we complement each other really well. I think that was something that way at the beginning of this, I did not expect how well we would be able to do this.
Oh, how we would both find our own little niches for getting these shows together, and
that we wouldn't be strangling each other on a regular basis.
I mean,
But I mean, we have our moments. We definitely do. But I think at the same time, like, we can pump out a show in like 24 hours while tired.
Yeah.
Like, completely exhausted. We're like, okay, what's this show about? Okay, we're talking about, plots. Okay, what about plots? No, it's a 101. Oh, okay. All right, well, what do we... And, like, 4 hours later, we're like... And you're, like, building it up, and we're done.
Our cross-coverage is also really good. It's like, occasionally when you're like, I'm swamped with work, and I'm having a panic attack, and I'm like, okay, cool. I will write the episode then,
Yeah, you literally spit this one out, and I looked through it, and I'm like, well, that's everything we kind of talked about a couple weeks ago. Oh, okay, I'm good.
And then, there's other times where I'm like, I'm busy at work and I'm having a panic attack.
Yeah, but what was funny was, like, even when we were doing stuff way at the very beginning of everything, when we were back at when we were working in the booths at in Royal Oak, we had very, very little in our framework of our shows. We look back at some of those show sheets, and there's like 12 bullet points maybe. And we would easily talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
Now we refine it, and it's wonderful.
I think the biggest change there was that we were doing those at Podcast Detroit,
Yeah.
And so we had to adhere to an hour time limit because that's all we had the studio space for.
Yeah.
So we couldn't run over. And now that we've got our own studio space, it's like, who cares if we do an hour and 30-minute show? Let's...
I mean, sometimes our listeners, but nobody's bitched at us about it yet. So.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like,
Yeah, please bitch at us. Come on our Discord, bitch at us.
Until we start, tweet at us.
Do something.
Et cetera, et cetera. Slide into our Instagram DMs.
Woo. But anyways, so that being said, I only have one other piece of news because it hit me the other day. Like, I was looking through our emails and stuff, and I was like, oh crap, I got to respond to a bunch of people because we've actually had people reach out to us for our shows. We have 3 shows coming up with co-hosts, with guests.
Yeah.
And they all reached out to us, and I was so excited to hear about it.
Yeah.
Like, it was wonderful. And, so we're excited. We're going to be bringing some shows to you, some wonderful topics and some new content. And sometime this fall, if everything comes well, we'll actually be doing a review before the Kickstarter final stuff gets shipped out. We'll get to do that, and we may actually have some of the creators on with us. So we'll see how that goes. Because, Kickstarters are Kickstarters. It's always hard to know the timing on when things are, publications get finished.
Yeah, definitely.
But they said about 6 months.
Cool.
So, so I'm excited for the future. So tonight's topic, we have a 202. We are deep diving again.
Yeah, so the 202 series, once again, in case you're kind of new or, just picking the show up here, the 202 series is kind of a continuation of the 101 series we did last year. The first Wednesday of every month was our 101s. Now our 202s are kind of like we're deep diving a niche situation or rules interpretation.
A concept we kind of touched on in the 101s, but we were like, we're not doing that. We're not going that deep.
Right.
We're just skimming the edge of that.
That's too deep for beginners, but we'll circle back around. Well, this is our circling back around.
Yeah, maybe it's something you've thought about, but you really don't know how to get into it.
So this week we are talking about character-driven plots, and now I wish to clarify that there are kind of 2 different types of character-driven plots, and this may not be the type that you think it is. So typically when you think character-driven plot, you're thinking like, okay, PC handed in a backstory where they said, evil vampire killed their family or something like that, and so you make the vampire if not the big bad evil guy, at least a villain, and then you go and you fight him, and he feels better about it, and boom, done. And that is a character-driven plot. That is a way to do it, and that's very good.
Nothing wrong with
Incorporating
it.
your character's backstory into the main plot, that's wonderful. That's not what we're talking about tonight.
Not tonight.
Tonight we are talking about the more specific and more difficult to pull off psychological character plot.
Yeah, one that takes the depth of takes one of the hardest things, and one of the things we talk about a lot is listening to what your players are doing, not just what they present. Because I will flat out say it: a lot of people will drop things from their character history on the table at session 0 and even session 1, and by session 5 they have forgotten who they were because they aren't the history. They're not staring at it on a regular basis. I'm not saying that's every single character out there and player, but most have a hard time adhering to all of the details of the history that even they presented, because they're not the history. They're the current incarnation of what's going on with them, and current situations change that. So in that sense, even for you to use that information, unless it's very obviously from the beginning of the story that this is what the story is about, they may not have a recollection about it. On the other hand, if it's 5 or 6 game sessions in and you've noticed a trend, you can exploit that trend and examine it with them.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That's the direction we're taking. We're talking about something that is, and I liked your terminology that you used in this, is that it is a internally focused narrative game that shows us ones where the players are aware of themselves.
Yeah. This is a very specific type of move for a very specific type of story. Okay, so first off, if your game is more externally focused, as in you have a big bad evil guy that is the external force, you're trying to save the world, maybe you don't have the time to devote to sitting down and going, okay, what is this character feeling?
Now, it's not saying it doesn't happen.
Right. And but some narrative games you do absolutely have the time
I think
for it.
Critical Role is a good example of that.
Yes.
Where you get both large scale of story and a lot of personal interaction. But again, that's a lot of depth from players who love personal depth.
Yeah, sure. And again, keeping in mind that Critical Role is a bunch of trained actors.
Exactly.
Who know how to explore these things
And want
amidst
to.
an external threat,
Yeah.
If you've been watching Legend of Vox Machina on Amazon Prime, Percy's story was a very good example of that.
100%.
They did have an external threat, but they did also spend a lot of time looking at Percy's mental state and where his conflicts were, etc., etc.
Grog was the same thing, I would say.
So you can do it, but it's more difficult the more external distraction you have.
Yep.
Okay. Second off, make sure that your game is very narratively focused. Okay. If your game is just about killing monsters and not about telling a deeper story about your characters, and kind of exploring their desires and emotions, motivations, fears, hopes, dreams, etc., this sort of move probably won't work because it's going to feel very out of place. Where it's like, okay, we're in the middle of a dungeon, kicking down doors and getting treasure and killing whatever random monsters, and now all of a sudden it's like, okay, but aren't you conflicted about why you're doing all of this? It's like, no. Also, that's a weird narrative change,
I feel that there's a lot of survival stories that do this, but you have to understand that, like, when you're dealing with a survival story, either the 7 people trapped on a mountain kind of thing, where it's like, oh, we're all stuck here surviving, so we have to expose ourselves and the truths within us. Clue did a great job of that. You don't find when you are banded together in a tactical sense wanting to find shifts and grays between each other.
Right.
And that's where things can feel very odd without there being a point of pause.
Right.
So if you're going to be doing tactical shifts, and I think this is an example where if you've got a very militaristic story where it's we fight through so far, we then must relax and recuperate, and during the relaxing recuperation, you build story within, and then you move through the tactical part of the story again, where the tactics is really just your journey. It's your travel time.
Yeah, sure.
Mouse Guard does that very well.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And so you have those pauses. It's during those pauses, those narrative-heavy pauses, where you're really focused.
Yeah, little pauses.
That's right, little pauses.
Yeah.
So I think that's the only shift there. But again, we're still talking where the narrative-heavy aspect sits itself very forward, and the players are very much involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. So here's the general idea of this very specific move that we're going to deep dive.
Yeah.
So we're going to describe it a little bit, and then we're going to show you a living example that I pulled off in my game.
Yep.
And how that all went down.
And we're going to talk from both the storyteller and the player aspect.
And the player, because Rob's character was the
person.
Target of this particular.
I did not see it coming.
At least not to the extent that I think I went into it. I was like, we're gonna look at your character's motivations a little bit, and he was like, okay. And then 3 game sessions later, you're like, I don't even know who I am anymore.
Exactly. It made me really think.
All right, so I want to shout out to Violent Menace in the live chat. Thank you for joining us. We've opened up our live chat on the
for listeners as well
on the Discord.
Normally we have it for just our Patreon members, but tonight it's 200th. It's a special episode. Come on in.
Yeah, big shout out. Thank you for joining us tonight. Yeah. All right, so the general idea is to get into the character's head and have the struggle take place internally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't take that literally. There's big caveats to struggle takes place internally.
Yes.
Okay. There's a way to do this. You have to use external forces to do it, and you have to demand external output.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Kind of an interesting oblique comment. We'll get to it.
Right. Okay, so basically purely internal battles in a tabletop sense. Like you can get away with that when you're writing a book, because you can spend whole pages, whole chapters of just the character's internal monologue, right? You can't get away with that in a tabletop game.
Yep.
You've got other players at the table who need to be interacting with the story. Even if that character is talking out loud about what their character's internal monologue is, it's just not interesting gameplay for anybody because it's not interactive.
Right.
So other PCs in the group should be part of the input the character receives.
I think this is one of the most critical parts of it, because it's not just you as the storyteller adding a bunch of NPCs that they don't care about.
Right.
It's about the PCs that they live and breathe with every day, asking the question, what are you doing?
Yes. And so those PCs, especially because they are constantly present through this, and that presumably the PC that is essentially the target of this character focus is their friend, they kind of become the proverbial angels and devils on their shoulders.
Exactly.
Suggesting actions and reactions to them.
Yeah, there's only one cart left in the burning town that you've been loading with gold, and after you get settled up with all the bad guys, your ringleader jumps in the cart and says, let's go, and as you go to load the last barrel, and you realize that in the back of the cart, all the gold is on the ground, and there's a bunch of orphans who have crawled into the dead space. Do you leave them?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody asks, we need to get out of here. Get the gold. And now there's a question.
Which do you value more? Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So, by demanding this external output, you motivate action, okay, which changes the world around the character and allows the other players to interact with it.
Yep.
All right. So, how do I set this up? First and foremost, talk to the player about their character, okay?
Communication is the key.
This whole thing kind of starts out of character, because there's a couple of things you kind of need to get past if you're going to get into this sort of deep psychological gameplay.
I would say not even get past. There's some things you've just got to get through, which is like, is this okay?
Yeah, is this okay is a first one. Like, some players are not going to be up for digging psychologically into things because they just want to show up, drink beer, eat pretzels, and
roll some dice,
kick down some doors, get some treasure,
sure.
whatever story you're telling. Or pretend I'm a Jedi for an hour and a half a night, whatever. But then also some players don't think that having their characters' skeletons dragged out of their closets is fun gameplay.
Right.
They don't want to examine their character like that because sometimes it's not fun to think about why, an orphaned, person who grew up, in a warrior tribe would want to go dungeoneering or something, you know. it's not fun to think about the motivations of those sort of things, because sometimes a lot of these things are dark and icky.
Mm-hmm.
And it might hit on some traumas and whatnot.
And you don't necessarily know what they haven't put on the table or during session 0.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, they have no idea something's going to be brought up. And if you're like, hey, how do you feel about orphans? They might just immediately go like, what? What are you going to do to orphans? And at that point, you'd be like, absolutely nothing. Thank you very much.
Yep.
You know at that point that that's a subject that you shouldn't touch, that you shouldn't even get near.
But all in all, though, I mean, cautions aside, always talk to your characters first, or your players first. And don't be afraid to do this. I do this on a frequent basis with my players, and honestly, I think I run a much better game because I have started having out-of-character conversations about the characters and just what they want, you know? I know I've mentioned this on the show before, where you just ask them, like, hey, you know, how do you feel about this particular plot thread?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, not something my character particularly cares about. He's much too distracted by this other plot thread.
Oh.
Okay. I won't put too much energy into that thread then. But thank you for also adding that bit about the other one that you are very interested in. I will redouble my efforts, and I can think of 3 different angles I can fork that.
Yeah, if you don't get anything else out of what we're talking about tonight, that bit of communication right there. There's 2 parts to it. 1, addressing your customers, your players, about what their character and they are interested in, and 2, being able to just shift to the left.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not going to be fun if you cram down your ideas down their throat.
And that's disappointment on both sides of the table. Yeah. One, because you're giving them a plot that they're not interested in, so now they feel like they have to engage with it.
Yeah.
But also because you're not going to get a good outcome from that.
No.
Why waste your time doing something that's not fun for the players involved, you know? Move on to something else that is fun for them.
Exactly.
And you brought up an interesting point earlier in discussions, is, what about, like, tipping your hand to your players?
Your players aren't going to be tipped. Straight up. Like, I am going to flat out say this. Unless your players have addictive memory and very...
Adenic.
Thank you. Immediately can recall that and then put all the puzzle pieces together instantaneously, which honestly is grand. Let them do it. They're not going to think about this. The moment they leave the table, they are done thinking about it.
I have had whole discussions where you have helped me plan plot before, and you've still been surprised and blindsided by it when it hit the table.
Because it's not in my headspace, literally until we sit back down at that game.
Yep.
Yeah, I am not there. I'm not interested. I open my book, I look at my notes, and I'm like, oh shit, that's right. This is what we did last game. Crap.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the truth. I still, to this day, through every single table I've ever sat at, every session I've ever been through, all the ones that I've ran, I have never known players to have steel minds about things that are discussed. Yeah. Ever. Even the ones who I know have steel minds.
Yeah.
And can remember all kinds of crazy details. Nope. It just isn't there.
Yep.
So don't even let that weigh you down.
Yep. All right, so... next step, after you've gotten some information from your player, you've gotten their buy-in, okay? Identify the struggle. All right, now this is the big thing. People are beings of contradictions.
Yep.
Okay? All of us do it. All of us have our own hypocrisy.
All the time. And it's doubly so when you're playing a role, because oftentimes you present into your character a contradiction to yourself. I am not the big, strong fighter.
Ergo, I will play a barbarian in our next game.
Right.
So that I can pretend to be one.
Right. And I am going to contradict even the big, dumb fighter on occasion with something smart.
Yep.
Okay, that sets a contradiction that isn't something that I put down. Because I'm presenting myself through that character.
But we're looking a little more idealistically in this one.
Yep.
Okay. Now, there's contradictions, like you said, all over the place. But look for ones in their ideals, okay? Find one and exploit it. Did you say you want peace, but you solve things with violence? That's a contradiction.
Yep.
Do you say you want a quiet life, but you always skip opportunities to retire in lieu of more action?
Yep.
That's a contradiction.
Yep.
What's keeping you in the game,
Yep.
you know? Do you say you accept everyone in spite of their differences, but still hold prejudice in your heart against a group?
Yep.
That's a contradiction.
Yep.
You know?
Are you secretive, yet say that you're an open book?
Yeah. That's a contradiction. Find it and find a way to exploit it, all right? Find or make external forces that pit those two against one another.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So basically, you want both of these things to demand their character's attention
and action. They have to like physically make an action.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just to think about it.
Right, but something to demand action on their part. So we'll take the example of they want peace, but they always solve things with violence. Have someone demand that they devote their time to, say, like resolving something peacefully. But then have another, force pulling on them and basically saying, like, you need to draw your sword and deal with this right now or people are going to die.
Right.
And then, that's the sort of thing that we're talking about. That it demands action but pulls them in two different directions in either side of that contradiction.
Right off the bat. But I often, like, and what I would agree, and we'll talk about this later, is setting that as a pace. Don't make it a long, drawn-out thing. Make it a simple action. Let them have their chance.
Yep.
And do what they do. Just make a note.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. Don't belabor it. Don't make it an intense thing. The opening interaction for all of these types of things should always be swift. They should always, you just examine what they have done.
Mm-hmm.
And present enough space for you to examine it.
Yes.
Bystanders are a great thing beyond the group. It is inevitable that you want to make sure that not just the players around them are examining it, but others is a key component to that. There is some other way to examine it.
Exactly. Now, you want to make both of these choices attractive.
Yes.
Because if one of them is easy to say no to, it isn't a moral dilemma.
Right.
It's just a simple choice. Take the better version, right?
Yep.
The other thing is positives and negatives help.
Mm-hmm.
Not only should both choices be beneficial in some way, there should ideally be a negative aspect to not choosing the other choice as well.
And it doesn't have to be complicated.
What you are doing is essentially the trolley problem.
Yes.
You're putting both of their ideals on separate tracks and handing them the switch that diverts an oncoming trolley to run over one of them.
Yep.
That's it. That's the whole thing.
Yep.
Now, reinforce this choice through the story.
Yep.
Don't just sit back and watch the character pull or not pull. Ask them.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly remind them of the stakes. If you pull that lever, this choice is going to be made, and these are going to be the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
I know, but if you don't, these are going to be the consequences. I know.
Yep. And the thing is that the trolley problem doesn't have to. And I often like the idea that it starts as a very simple action where they've already made a trolley decision.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't realize that was a trolley decision.
Yep.
And then later on, that trolley decision is re-examined in a different way. And someone just looks at them and says, "We already made this decision before. Why is it so hard now?" That's it. It's that simple.
Because the stakes are higher. Because now we're thinking about it.
Now we get the time to examine it.
Yep.
And someone's asking questions.
And all of this, remind you, is taking place in front of the other PCs. So all of them are going to have opinions. This is their friend, after all, on what the outcome of this is going to be.
Yeah.
And so, as we showed, and when I pulled this one off in my game, like, you have PCs that have strong opinions on either side of it.
Yep.
There were some heated in-character arguments.
We were
at
very
the table.
careful. We were very careful.
There was a giant F-bomb that got dropped from your character that you were like, I look him in the eye, I stand up, and this is purely in character. F you!
Yeah, I literally walked out. Yep.
And then, the other thing is, have, just in case the character gets too in their own head and stuff like that, I always find that having others point out their contradictions to them,
especially if your players can't, and that's why I say having more visibility over this is great. One of my favorite kind of things about this is it doesn't just have to be pain conflict. Social conflict of status is one that can be equally as applied. We're kind of talking about this in the sense of someone making a death or life situation in this or that. But it doesn't have to be. It can be haves and have-nots. Mm-hmm. It can be it can be a matter of me or them.
Yeah.
Us or them. So always think about a weight scenario like that where it starts out very clean, but the effects that ripple away from it are seen almost immediately. The first point of the ripple hits, and they see that reflection for just a moment.
Yep.
So that later on, that ripple becomes much stronger. They know what's going to hit.
Yeah.
You know. And we're talking about this very esoterically. We're going to give an example.
So,
we're going to work through that.
Let's get into the example.
Yeah. So in your game, in Tamriel, we have my character.
Yes.
Initially, my character is basically a kind of ex-military. Mm-hmm. Got out of it, went into the church. Was given a gift by the gods, effectively, and didn't understand necessarily why he was chosen, but he knew he was, and it drew him into the faith. Yeah. Into a faith of mercy.
Mercy, yeah. It was the god of mercy, basically. Mm-hmm. There was a pair of gauntlets that represented him, and they saved you and one or two other people, I think, in a time of dire need.
Correct.
And so you kind of took that as your sign, and you're like, okay, maybe I'll devote my life to exploring what that meant.
Yep. And so it followed that faithful line, which led me to being part of of continuing that with the Fighters Guild versus staying in the military.
Yeah. And so originally, just to put some numbers behind it, you were a healing domain cleric in D&D 5th edition when we first created these characters before we switched over to Savage
Which effectively is, as it moves into Savage World, really didn't change anything.
Yeah, it really didn't change much. So already we've kind of got this inherent contradiction in your character. You're a man of war serving a god of peace.
Effectively, yeah.
Okay, so already we've got these little seeds here, but I wouldn't say that's enough right there to just jump on and be like, oh, I gotta give this guy a moral dilemma,
Yep.
What really started to illustrate this to me was, like, in our very first session, actually, this whole thing kind of flared up.
Yeah.
We had a...
very simple milk run of a quest.
Yeah, we had a PC that the player did not stay with our group for various reasons, but their PC was a warrior, and very very much in the hey look, I kill things, that's what I do, I'm a professional killer, I go out and I hunt monsters or whatever, and I don't feel bad about doing that job because some things need killing. You guys came across some goblins. And your character, being, serving the God of Mercy, decided that they were just going to, we have to show him mercy. I mean, he's surrendered.
They literally surrendered to us, threw down their weapons, and cowered. Yeah. I'm like, we'll tie him up, we'll get him out of here, and it'll be done. Yeah.
Whereas the warrior was like, why are we taking goblins captive? They're monsters. Let's just exterminate them and go home. You guys butted heads, and in the middle of this argument, he went, you know what, I'm going to solve this problem for you, and just lopped the thing's head off.
Yep.
It almost came to blows. You were so angry.
I was pissed.
Now, that PC left the party shortly thereafter. I put him in my back pocket as a future NPC.
Which is great. I always do that. Always do that.
Because I saw the heightened emotions, and I knew that PC... that NPC then would represent those emotions to
that
you.
Moment, yep.
So if I ever needed you to have someone that you hated, I could pull him back out and stick him in various situations.
Yep. Was a great example.
I had advancement from you.
Yep.
So later on, then we end up with the bandit plot that I ran. Talked a bit about that on the show earlier. Bandits up in the Highlands doing bad things. In their initial foray into the Highlands, there was a big ambush that the PCs not only survived, but turned and won.
They were using children in that one, which was another thing of it was really a moment where multiple people in the group were quite angry at them.
Oh yeah, no, and it was designed to show you exactly how out of hand things had gotten up there.
And you had checked in with us 2 weeks before this, two sessions before, asking, is okay if kids are involved?
Yeah, because I didn't want to get too deep into that plot if that was a no for somebody.
And we cleared it.
Yep.
So,
and no kids were harmed. It was more or less they were handed crossbows and given ill-fitting armor and then shoved into
literally shoved.
Go get them, kids, and you could tell the kids didn't want to be there. They were all cowering and stuff like that. So it was one part ambush, one part rescue operation, because it was like save the kids, you know.
Yeah, all happening in an instant.
In an instant. So, anyways, they won the encounter. They took one of these bandits captive, and your character proceeded to torture him for information by breaking his fingers.
I did.
In fact, one of our other PCs had to kind of wheel you back and be like, "Hey, let's take it down. You're at a 10. We need you around a 7, buddy." And then you set that bandit free.
Yeah, we kicked him on his way.
It was basically told, like, you know, go west, don't stop until you hit Morrowind.
Right.
And
basically walk for a month. We never want to see you again.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, there was a couple other incidents. I remember one discussion got a little heated and maybe got a little away from you guys, where you suggested poisoning the water supply of a town because there were spies in it. And I don't even remember what your
I don't remember
the line of logic was.
There was a line of logic there, and I don't recall what it was.
But there was a moment where, like, other people looked at you and were like, poison of the water supply? And you're like, okay, maybe that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Didn't forget that it came out of your mouth.
No.
You know? A lot of, like, when you got into combat situations, you weren't in a defensive posture. You were in a very aggressive, righteous, angry, you know, sort of warlike posture, and just kind of generally a grumpy asshole.
Yeah, I mean,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
you know, so
it was a position that I actively I denoted in my character as I was doing things, and from my point of view on that, I made a note that I had 2 postures at all times, and there was always 1 or 2 tipping points, and those tipping points were always: is there when righteousness comes forward, it should always come forward as anger, because he doesn't understand any other way. If those he believes are loyal to him are at harm, or ones who are basically at the mercy of others are at harm, anger will follow it. You know, because that's always been his, like, trigger point. And so I just kind of kept that along, and always wanted that thread to be consistent until it is broken. Yeah. So and so I just kind of kept drawing that line again and again in different ways, so that as I was like, okay, this still fits the character, I'm still following that edict that I stuck with myself, because again, he started out life in a kind of shitty place in the military. So
yeah, absolutely. You gained a lot of baggage from it. And,
I did.
And again, I wish to point out that just because we're taking all this time belaboring the contradiction of his character, does not mean he was being played badly or anything like that.
No.
Again, we're all of us, Rob and I included, are people of contradictions.
Constantly.
I could point out 3 or 4 hypocrisies I live day to day, every single bit of my life. You know.
Most of them are minor and we never notice them. Other people point them out, and usually we say, hey, you called me out.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like, you should talk to a therapist.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's the things we do, but we absurd them in gaming.
Yes, exactly. Because we're doing this for drama and not for, therapy. Sometimes. Most of the time. All right, so where does this whole plot twist thing come in? So there was a little bit of setup to it.
Yes.
The very first one was Meridia's Beacon,
which was so benign and ridiculous if you know Skyrim.
Yeah, if you've played Skyrim, a new hand touches the beacon.
God, I hated that quest.
You know it. You absolutely know it. I dropped this into his pocket at one point. It was random loot that they picked up along the way. He could have literally just chucked it out into the woods and said, nope!
Rob almost did.
And would have been done with
Rob
it.
almost did.
But I think you were curious to see where it led, and I'm glad you did.
Well,
but again, you could have just done that, and I'd have been like, okay, I guess that answers that question, and I'd have moved right on with it.
There would have still been something else to do.
Yeah. It wasn't terribly important. I didn't have these plans ahead of time.
Okay.
Right? It was literally just that would be fun to see if you pursued it, to see if you picked up Dawnbreaker. I kind of thought, like, if you did, it would be that, like, mercy versus warfare, because Meridia is a very militant force.
Yeah, oh god, yeah.
And so she would be asking you to go and kill things. Although they were all undead, she would ask you to go on the warpath.
Don't worry, they're all really bad.
Yeah. Yeah,
that
so
whole concept.
There was kind of that idea of like, oh, this will be fun, because you're supposed to be peace, but she's a representation of war. I wonder where that will go. But I didn't have grand plans for it beyond that.
No,
right.
Which is honestly, I will say, from an outsider's perspective, a great thing just to have a note about, like literally just something that starts you to has effectively a seed that you set to the side, a very simple seed that says this player does X, this thing shows that and presents Y.
Yep.
That's it. You can drop that at any point, at any farther point in the future, and just be like, there you go. There's some story as it comes.
Mm-hmm. And it allows you to foreshadow some really nice things further down the road. And I really love that. All right, so step 1. He takes Meridia's beacon to a shrine, and the Daedric Prince speaks to him and says basically that something vague about a growing darkness in the city that he has to resolve. Do not be more specific than that. I didn't want to give you numbers or types of enemies or what you had to do.
Vague.
It was go take care of the growing darkness.
Yep.
Because that leaves everything up to your interpretation on how to resolve.
But what's funny was everyone else at the table had their own interpretations. They all wanted to know what this meant.
Yep.
And so at that point, the whole group was involved. We all kind of kicked around ideas, but again, we hadn't been into town to look at anything, really. So we headed back in to get more information.
All right. And then you have a cult that she told you how to get in contact with.
Yep.
You go through the little motions to contact the cult through these weird little back channels. And they basically tell you that you're the new Exalted Champion. And they hand you a magic sword. They hand you Dawnbreaker.
For killing undead.
It is amazing at killing undead. It is literally the one thing the sword is meant to do.
To which almost everybody goes, oh, we're killing undead.
Uh-huh.
The problem of a growing darkness is the undead.
We all kind of know about it. Now, remember, we say this all the time on the show. If all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Okay?
Yep.
So if you give a violent man a tool for violence and then ask him to choose mercy, you're already setting up an interesting, moral dilemma for them. So we're setting the stage now.
Yep.
Okay, we've got our magic undead slaying sword in hand. We're told we're the chosen one, and we're told there's something bad over there. You should do something about it. They get into town. People are going missing. There's missing persons posters up all over, like, the job boards and stuff.
Yep.
Guards are on edge. There's whispers that possibly soon the Count is going to institute a curfew because things have gotten so bad, especially at night.
Yes.
Why isn't the Count Hasseldor doing more to do this? And then we get to the tavern, and we twist the knife a little bit. So remember how I said I took that PC from Pryor and I put him in my back pocket so that when I wanted to make him angry, I could pull him out? This is where I pulled him out.
She did. So I'm sitting there at the bar. We're discussing within the group what we're going to be doing for the rest to kind of pull information together. I have access to this sword of killing undead, and there are other things to kill besides undead in the area. There are Fighters Guild takes that are going on, and in walk 2 members of the Fighter Guild and immediately pull up chairs at our table as if they recognize us, because they do.
They were at the bar. They saw you come in.
Yeah, and have a conversation.
Yeah, and they were like, hey, Theodane, what's up, buddy? And it is none other than this PC from the beginning of the game and the bandit that they sent on their way after torturing.
The dude I broke the fingers of, yeah.
He did. He headed east, just like you told him, but he never made it to Morrowind. He only made it to the next town down the road named Skingrad, which is where you are now. He decided he would hole up there, decided to go legit, joined the Fighters Guild too. So now he and the dude you hate are buddies.
Yep.
And they have a common, let's call him a friend.
Yeah.
And some stories to share about him.
Yeah.
So the old PC guy buys Theodane a beer and starts calling him Killer.
Yeah.
Just in an affectionate way, though. Hey, what's up, killer? Let me buy you a beer. It congratulates him on getting over his aversion to killing sentient creatures. He genuinely thinks this is a good thing because you've come around to his side of thinking, right?
Yep.
Like, now you two see eye to eye. Like, you're not going to argue anymore. This is great. This is absolutely great. I'm so proud of you for your character growth in deciding that killing and murdering is okay.
Yep.
The tortured NPC is just quiet.
Yeah.
And just staring at his beer most of the time. And at one point, I think the NPC you hate nudged him and was like, hey, you haven't said much. And he's like, you broke my damn fingers.
Yeah.
What do you want me to say to him?
Yeah.
I don't like him. I don't want him sitting here.
Yep.
Just so that I could, again, twist the knife that you tortured this guy.
Yep.
He lived.
Yeah.
Congrats on the mercy.
Right.
But you tortured him first.
I did.
You know?
Yep.
So
from my perspective, having this all in just one scene, one very simple scene, I had a hard time, like, as a player, figuring out what I was going to say. I was blown away. It was exceptionally uncomfortable, and everybody at the table is 100% transfixed on this. Because they were all involved in all of those moments.
Yep.
And it's just this kind of jaw-dropping scene. Because they're all like...
What is he going to do?
Like,
is he going to flip the table?
Yeah, and eventually it just kind of fizzled out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, well, I'm glad that asshole's out of here. You know, and,
yeah.
And it was just like, okay, things are getting examined. But everybody kind of had a meta opinion of what just happened, but there was very little said between characters.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty quiet moment, but I think everybody kind of knew what had just gone down, you know?
Yeah, it was a call-out. Without a doubt, it was a call-out.
Now, the thing is, okay, so all of that sets the stage in 3 ways. All right? First, the growing darkness is very real and needs solving very quickly. You saw the missing persons posters.
Yeah.
There's a curfew that's going to be instituted. Like, clearly this town is in danger. People are going missing. They're probably dying.
Yep.
All right. This sets a sort of doom clock in
terms, yeah.
You can hear it ticking, at least in the background.
Yeah. There's an event that's going to occur regardless.
This makes you feel very bad about the violence while presenting you with a situation that could be solved by violence.
Mm-hmm. With a very violent weapon.
With a very violent weapon.
Yeah.
So now you're like, oh, these guys think I'm a killer. Man, I hope they don't mind that I'm here to kill... Oh.
They don't mind.
Yeah.
They don't mind.
Yeah. And then 3, all like you said earlier, all of this happens in front of the PCs, so they're there to provide input for it. Some are going to have your back, others are going to be hesitant, and now you have your angels and devils in play, because when you lean on your friends, you're going to be not only being pulled by the plot itself, but pulled by your other PCs who see you having this dilemma.
And internally, my character is being pulled in 2 very different directions. I have a god of mercy who has said nothing. They say nothing.
They say nothing. The Aedra don't talk to you.
And guidance from them is fleeting.
Mm-hmm.
Where I have a very vocal Daedra telling me exactly what needs to be done in a vague way.
In the vaguest of terms, yes.
You know, because they can't actively affect Mundus, but by God, they will put every ball into play.
Yes, they will.
To make sure that it'll happen eventually.
The Daedra love manipulating mortals.
So, running through my character's head immediately thereafter is, holy crap, we have vampires.
We have vampires. So,
vampires mean we have people being turned. So now I have the new dilemma of, can I save them? Am I killing people who are missing?
Yeah. And this isn't like, I didn't want to give you zombies, because zombies are like, they're old, they're rotten, they're already gone.
Yeah.
You don't feel bad about killing zombies, but like, vampires still kind of look and operate like people, especially in the Elder Scrolls. They're vampires are sentient.
Yeah.
Now, most of the ones I gave you were called blood fiends, and those are like feral ghouls.
Right.
So, that did take a little bit of the I didn't want them to be a huge focus. They were a weapon, not, people I wanted you to necessarily focus on.
Mm-hmm.
But they still had names. There were still missing persons posters up for them. They were still fresh enough that living people were missing them.
Yeah, and as we progressed to get the depth of the plot, we had to move through them.
Yep.
And that was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Moving into it. The group moved in, realizing what had to be done, encouraged me to recognize what had to be done, right up until the point where we found someone who needed to be saved, who had a chance.
Yeah, it was an NPC that I had to invent on the fly, actually, because you asked for like an NPC contact for the cultists.
Yeah.
Before you actually made like official contact with them, you kind of wanted to like talk to them and be like, "Why do you worship Meridia? What do you see in her?"
Right.
Just to kind of get the vibe check for like, is she as awful as people say, or is she she got
Are you all
qualities?
brainwashed?
Right, right. And so, like I said, I didn't have her in my notes at all. She was just someone I invented so that you could have that conversation, and then everybody kind of felt a little attached to her, so I had her be the next abductee.
And you invested other NPCs in her so that they were worried.
Yeah, because she
made...
wasn't just a random NPC. When she went missing, her absence was felt.
Yeah.
And the last person she was seen alive with was you, so they came looking for answers from you.
Which was a whole nother great scene, but we won't get into that. So, as we move through these vampires and save who we can save, we quickly discover that not only are these vampires here, but also the Count himself is one.
Right.
He is diseased and trying to find a cure for him and his wife, who is effectively in a coma.
Yes.
And he has created the monster who are creating the monsters.
Yes. So
we don't know how, but we know that those two steps are clear.
So you've got two vampires. One is a good man who did something...
Well, in quotes, a good man.
Well, okay.
At that point.
The thing is, I put it out there that he was a good man.
Yes.
Regardless of how much you ignored about that, and you did actively because he's noble and your character hates nobles.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But even the leader of the Thieves Guild told you, no, I like the Count.
Right.
Like, he's a good man with good policies who does good things for his people.
Right.
Now, he's also the law, so he's my direct opposition. But, like, I don't want a different person making political decisions for the city. He's good.
Right. He's doing the right things.
He's compassionate, regardless of the fact that he wants me in his stocks.
Right.
But he made a horrible mistake, and he created this monster.
Yes.
The monster is a very bad woman who is, for righteous reasons, because she was against her will turned into a blood-sucking monstrosity, now on the righteous path to vengeance.
Yeah.
So...
Which is the other screw of the turn, which is that, like, you shouldn't be fighting me. We should be fighting him.
Exactly.
Like, you knew I hated him for being this as just an extra thing, but the fact that he was a lord who basically made decisions that had to be made. So, as a player, I'm spouting off the fact that I have a vehement hate for this guy. Everybody at the table is just like, okay, well, he's a lord. Yeah, he's a vampire. We don't know what happened there. I'm like, well, he's a vampire who created a vampire. Like, there's a problem here.
Yeah, secondly, we have to kill him. And
he's also a shitty lord, which brought us to the FU moment of things where our local noble in our group was just like, yeah, he's the Count. He can do what he wants.
Like, he just thinks he's above the law. Well, he kind of is.
He is above the law.
He literally makes the laws. This is County Skingrad. He is the Count of Skingrad. Yes,
ergo,
mathematically, that's how this works.
Yeah, and the answer was like, okay, screw you.
Right.
Like, you're missing the point of the conversation.
You're just going to take his side because he actually is right?
Well, I still hold firm on the fact that we were dealing with haves and have-nots in the conversation.
Nothing Thalion said to you was objectively incorrect.
No, I never said that.
Yep.
But I also said that he was a dick for saying all the things that he said.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe not what you needed to hear at that point, but nothing he said was objectively incorrect.
Correct. No, we cleared through that.
But for the listeners though, I want to can
you feel it, by the way?
Yeah, I want to specifically point out though. Yeah, you can tell the emotional investment even all this time later. He's still
it's great.
Like, heated about this, But I want to point out that the important takeaway from there being two vampires is that I put a little bad into the good one and a little good into the bad one, so that it blurred the lines. Okay.
Yes.
The trolley problem doesn't work if there's an objectively correct choice.
Correct.
And so what I needed to do was hand him a tool of destruction and ask him which one doesn't get killed. If either. Do you kill both? Do you kill neither?
Yep.
Do you kill one and not the other? Why?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep.
So now we've baited the trap and we've set it, okay? And you're officially in the trap now.
Oh, 100%.
Bees in the trap, bees in the trap.
Yep.
So, how do we play this out? Both vampires are undead. Does that make them evil? Or does their sentience and ability to restrain them thirst give them leniency?
Mm-hmm.
Count Hasseldor is a good man who made a horrible thing. Does that condemn him? Yorda is a condemned murderer, but was defiled by the Count. Does that make her right enough to be aided in her crusade for vengeance?
Mm-hmm.
Meridia clearly wants you to slay all undead because they're impure monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Stendar asks that you choose mercy and compassion. Which higher power are you going to listen to? Do you try to please both?
Mm-hmm.
And what will your choice make you become? What long-lasting consequences is this decision going to have on your own soul?
Yep.
And I will say, at the end of this, you almost retired your own character.
I almost did.
Yep.
I almost did. Because my thought was, I literally didn't know exactly what I was going to do right up until the last minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, literally in the last minutes, when we were going to, like, the final episode of that arc, we walk into his effectively home.
The Castle Skingrad.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And from that point forward, my brain was stuck on, like, when this is over, however it ends,
I will have still killed the Count of Skingrad. Yeah.
Yeah. And possibly his wife.
Possibly his wife, depending on what happened there, yeah.
Yeah. And then you turned it again. You drove the sweet stake of he's a good man all the way by walking me through his home, knowing full and well that I'm walking around with the blade that could kill him.
Yeah, I wanted to reinforce, because I vibe checked with you before
100%.
this game.
Yep.
Okay, and again, constant communication. Okay, I wanted to know where your head was at,
Yep.
how you were feeling, if you were still okay with me dragging all your character skeletons out into the open and stuff like that, you know, whatnot. But also, like, what you were thinking, what you were planning in the future, so I could kind of plan around that. And you were really, really on the hype train to kill Hasseldor.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You absolutely just wanted to start just murdering vampires all over the place and just be done with it.
Yeah.
And so I did two things in that final scene, in that final confrontation. Hasseldor more or less invites you into his home, tells all the guards, like, when these dudes show up, don't stop them. Because if this violence is going to happen, I want it to happen here, and I don't want any collateral damage.
Mm-hmm.
None of my guards should stand in your way, because they don't have to pay for what I did.
Right.
You know? Let them in. You may have to clean up my blood later, but it's fine.
Yep.
Okay? Second thing he does, he hands a letter to the leader of the Mages Guild.
Yeah.
Basically exonerating you of his murder.
Mm-hmm.
Basically saying, yeah, look, I'm a vampire. He was a vampire hunter. I made a terrible mistake that warranted my death. Please don't hold him accountable for doing what probably should have happened a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
He's only doing what he needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, he took you... He's like, okay, look, you might be here to kill me, but let's call a truce for, like, 5 minutes. I want to show you something before you make that decision. And if after seeing this, you still want to stick a stake in my chest or whatever it is you're going to do, I understand. But I want to introduce you to my wife.
Yep.
Who is lying in state, basically.
In a crystal, casket.
It was the Dr. Freeze moment.
It was beautiful,
or
honestly.
Mr. Freeze
It was
moment.
the Mr. Freeze moment with, like, in an alchemy lab, but in this beautiful, like, sepulcher set for her,
covered in flowers, wearing a beautiful dress, just lying there
silently
peacefully.
sleeping. Yeah, as if she had never changed for all this time.
And he's like, I'm doing this all for her. And all this alchemy equipment you see, and all these tomes, and all the stuff that I've been doing with the Mages Guild behind everyone's back and stuff that is to try to find a cure so I can give her the rest she deserves.
Yeah.
And you're like, shit, I can't kill you now. Oh, you're a decent person with compassion in your heart.
And all he asks is, make sure you kill her too.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that
just
it's swift.
make it quick. Make it quick for
Yeah,
her.
promise me that it will be swift for her.
So that she doesn't suffer for my mistakes.
And it was like, of course. Like, if that's gonna, like, in my brain, I was like, I can agree to that without making other decisions. I can agree to that.
Yeah.
And then we have this fight with Yorda, which ends with her vanquishing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all left there in the middle of this room, effectively like in a circle, with my group basically slowly going like, yeah, we're gonna go check on people outside.
Right. We killed the bad vampire. It looks like our work here is done. We're gonna leave you and the Count alone because we don't want any part of this.
Yep.
Hope to see you soon, buddy.
Yep. And I basically decide to leave him.
Yep.
And he tells me to get the hell out of his house.
He's like, "Are we done here?" And you're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Get the hell out of my castle."
which was a great, and I think it was a good break. I think it was a comedic and yet not comedic break.
Yeah.
But it was, from my point of view, there was all of the trappings and remindings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the keys to doing these things properly is to remind the player what their original thoughts and decisions were.
Yeah.
Like, I made an active decision to be a follower of Stendar, one of Mercy and Compassion.
Yeah.
So you would constantly, hey, here's the trolley. Here are your choices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to remind you with this sheet of paper, Mercy and Compassion is what you wrote. Those are your handwriting.
Yeah.
Just remember, that's your handwriting, okay?
Yep.
Go ahead and make a decision, I dare you.
Yeah.
But, Rob, this is what you wrote down.
Yep.
Remember this. This is what you wrote down. And that is really the key to all of this. And it is, we say it's a 202 for a reason. This is not easy to pull off.
Not easy to pull off, and it is very much a niche situation. This is not a do this in every game. This is not a, try this in your next dungeon crawl,
Yeah. We've had moments like this in smaller applications that have happened in multiple places. I made Madeline the Bloody.
Yeah.
Because your character was leaning toward power.
Mm-hmm.
And I reminded you what power means. It means being the big dog and everybody fearing you.
Yeah. It means being feared and not respected.
Yep.
And my character kind of leaned into that and was like, okay, if feared is what I need to be,
Yep.
feared is what I will be. And you were like, okay, cool, you made your choice.
Yep.
And here are the repercussions.
And I kept those moments and shifted things in that direction.
Yep.
And sometimes it's as simple as that, but the hardest part, and it's always the hardest part of doing any of these things, is making sure that you have the buy-in from the player, that their character is making actions on the decision, and that you remind the player, hey, we're doing this. I'm not going to tell you what's going on. I'm not going to draw things out for you and give you a pay line. But this is happening, and see their reactions in comfort or slight discomfort with the situation, but excitement, like a roller coaster. And then that final payoff moment of, you've made your decision. I'm going to walk away and let that decision sit in you.
Yeah.
Don't go back and dig harder. There's no reason to.
Yeah.
Move on, find another player, find more plot. Let them stew and enjoy the meal that was set forth.
They're going to need a break after that.
Oh, God, yes.
They're going to need a break after that.
Yeah, I definitely did. I literally wrote a letter to another NPC basically saying, you may not hear from me.
Yeah.
Because I might be on the run.
By the time you read this, I'm either going to be dead, captured, or on the lam for a good long time.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Now, I will add two other things at the end of this discussion here. First off, to keep things going, if one side of the decision or the other starts to become too crystal clear,
right,
don't be afraid to adjust on the fly to blur that line again.
Yeah.
For instance,
just don't do it ridiculously.
After your encounter with Yorda, you when she revealed that Hasseldor was the one that changed her, you were like, Hasseldor's a vampire? Oh, screw that guy.
Oops, sorry.
That was the lid of the teapot falling off.
We're all good. We're all good.
Tried to refill my tea here.
Yeah. Hasseldor is a vampire.
Hasseldor is a vampire. You're like, oh hell yeah, we have to kill that guy now.
Yeah.
And I thought it's going to be too easy if you just decide like, oh yeah, no, we're just going to kill Hassildor now. That was all the evidence we needed, was the bad guy telling us that was, he's the real bad guy. So next session I introduced her crew. There was a bunch of mortal, NPCs that were essentially working as her little like criminal retinue, and they were shady as heck.
Yeah, super shady. Super shady.
And like actively unsettled you guys.
It really did.
And then at a candlelight vigil for the victims of the vampires.
Yeah.
They Yorda shows up and starts giving a speech about how awful Hassildor is, and her people are seated throughout the crowd and start whipping the crowd into a frenzy and turning it into a riotous mob.
To march on the cape.
To march on the Count, who had come into town to visit. And things went south very quickly. And so it was like one of those situations of like, oh, okay, maybe we were on Yorda's side up until now, but man, is she using some underhanded tactics orchestrated by some very shady people. Maybe she's not the good guy that we think that she is, So again, blurring the line. And what was Hassildor's part in all of it? Nothing. He was innocent.
Yeah.
He wasn't doing anything. He was doing the responsible thing. Talking, staying calm, keeping a level head. So don't be afraid to go back and blur the line. The second thing I will say is we talk a lot about consequences.
Yes.
The consequences of your actions. Make sure that, this is a moral dilemma and we're going to show you the consequences of the choices you've made. I wish you to understand that you should not punish your player for making these choices.
The word consequence is not punishment.
Yes, consequence does not equal punishment.
And if you can understand this, there's a lot of games that use the word consequence. They don't use the word punishment.
Exactly.
It sounds like it's punishment, but that is not the case. Just because you missed a roll, there is a consequence for missing that roll. It doesn't mean your character takes 10,000 damage and falls off the cliffside. It means they're still hanging onto the cliff, but they lost some gear, some important gear.
Sure.
That's a consequence.
And when I walked into this, I mean, up to the very end of it, I did not have a quote-unquote desired outcome. There wasn't a good or bad choice that you could have made. That's why I went out of my way, to write that letter to exonerate you of Hassildor's murder if you did take his life.
Which I didn't know about till the very end, but there was an assumption.
Because I didn't want you to have to retire a character because I put you in a bad position to have to make a choice.
Right.
I was just there. The only consequence I wanted at the end of this whole thing is to make you look back at your own character and go, wow, I had some stuff to work out there.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
If you'd have murdered them both, and probably his wife as well, you'd have had to just live with that. That was the consequence.
Yep.
That was it.
Yep.
What did it do to your soul on the way through?
Yep. Yep, exactly.
But no, you don't have to retire your character. I'm not going to have the authorities after you and anything like that.
No.
You're not going to get anything taken away from you or, anything. Your character's not going to die. Just think about what you've done.
Yep.
And while you're thinking about it, we will move on to some questions.
Yep, exactly. So, Nevim asks, is a character-driven plot the same as having a scenario focused on one or two characters? No.
No,
it is not.
Yes and no. I mean, it really depends on what you define as a character-driven plot.
Right.
In the rawest sense, yes. In the sense we're talking about here tonight, not really.
But it is required. The character's action is required.
Yes.
And I think that in that sense, it is driven in the sense that you demand action to have the results, to have the consequences.
Yes.
So, should scenarios be only composed of character-driven plots?
I mean, there are games like that.
There are definitely games like that.
I think a lot of the World of Darkness stuff that I remember being ran was very character-centric because a lot of it was World of Darkness touts itself as a game of internal struggle. Vampire the Masquerade, warring against the beast within, and a game of personal horror is what it was labeled as.
I think Urban Shadows is very much penned the same way.
Yeah, sure.
The scenarios are there. You know what's going on in the city. The question is how is it affecting you?
Yeah, exactly. And with the corruption mechanics and stuff like that, it arguably does that internal struggle a little bit better than humanity and Vampire ever did, you know?
I agree.
And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say... I think saying should scenarios only be composed of character-driven plots is too absolutist. But depending on the game you play, it can be.
I will read it as this. Should scenarios be composed of only character-driven plots? If the scenario includes a character-driven plot, the answer is yes.
Oh, I understand. Okay, should it be the only thing on the table?
Yes, you should not be bringing in... It should be a pause. It should be an interlude that interjects the plot. So if your plot's about killing a dragon... and one of your characters is having a personal scenario, it should be involved within the overall plot, but the overall plot should not be interjecting it. It should be its own thing. That is my statement, because you don't want to confuse and blend too hard.
I'm going to disagree with you. Because I pulled it off the table. Mogrub Gro Uzguk was a personal plot for the Mad Elf's character.
Yes.
But was also the external threat for the entire rest of the group. You can do it, but you just have to make sure that those two things don't interfere with one another. The big thing is concurrency.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You guys were going to fight Mogrub one way or another, because he put himself directly in the path of your, of your group. But... one of the characters at the table had a personal stake in punching him as hard as he could in the face with a fireball.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that statement. I'm not going to say that that's not a personal plot, but it's a very straight line.
It's a very straight line.
It's a very straight line.
It was an extraordinarily straight line.
It was a revenge plot.
But you can do it.
You can do it.
You can do it. You just got to make sure that those two lines run concurrently.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yes, and the problem that you have with creating conflict between the players, meaning some players who are okay with something, trolley track A versus track B within a character, if that's intertwined with the main plot, can really tear a group apart.
Oh, yeah, because, well, it's difficult to have agency when you've got an external plot that needs to get resolved, but then you start throwing moral dilemmas at them, of like, well, should we even be doing this?
Yeah, if Mogrub was a bad guy at one time, and now was doing something to help, and half of the group says we have to kill him, and the other half of the group says we need him for a bit longer doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Now you've created a very serious table problem.
Yep.
So, and that will tear a table apart. You don't necessarily want that.
Probably should focus on one or the other unless you can get them concurrent with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next one.
I've prepared my plots on one character, and sadly, the player, on last-minute call, cannot make it to the game session. Or in our case, gets to the game session and then gets a call from work.
Yep.
How can I save the upcoming game session, and what can be done to avoid such a situation?
Number one, I will say this. This happens all the time.
Yeah.
The best thing that you can do in any of these situations is the stuff that I think we talked about this in a previous show, one of the previous shows, we've had a number now, is that you have your standard, which is the pull a side quest together. Things can get delayed. No matter what's going on, delays can happen. Whether you're about to step into a big fight and everybody's like, okay, we're dealing with this big fight, right? And the main player who's supposed to be in this revenge plot is supposed to be involved in this fight, and they just got, they had to bail, for whatever reason. Part of the building falls down. So now you're separated from the other side. You have to work your way over to it, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have this other crap to deal with. Easily done. Mm-hmm. You're separated from that party member. Maybe, again, the earth shifts and cracks and they have to go a different way, or something falls apart. If it's wider than that, meaning like you're on a chase or you're trying to hunt something down, rain delay, ships delayed, orders delayed. There's all kinds of ways to delay a scene, to give yourself 1 or 2 more episodes even, to get back into track and pull everything right back to where it was.
Yeah. That's probably what I would have done in our situation. I actually had the whole opening was written leading into Heatsink's character, into Thalion, and the whole plot was dedicated to him, and then he get called into work literally 20 minutes after the start of our game.
Yep.
And that's probably what I would have had to have done is just say, okay, the soiree that was going to take place tomorrow night is now going to take place in 3 nights. What are you guys doing while he prepares for this?
Right. He's got to get clothes. He's got to get things.
He's going to make some social connections and do a little more digging for information. What is the rest of the group doing? You know?
Yep, exactly.
And then I've had to wing the entire thing, but, I've been in tougher situations.
We've talked about winging it.
Yep.
So.
What can be done to avoid a situation? You can't.
You can't.
You can't.
Cannot avoid.
Things happen, life happens.
And that's true whether or not it's a personal plot or just a character involved in the main plot that needs to be there.
Yeah, and look, it sucks, but ultimately, you got to remember it's a game.
Yeah.
And games come after real life concerns.
And I'm always going to say this: don't not play. You've got other people at that table who have waited just as long to do something.
Yep.
Play.
Yep.
Play.
All right. I think this is the first question we've gotten from this a new Discord member.
Relatively.
Miki Katse, or Miki for short.
Yep.
Miki asks, what can I do when some of my players' characters have an elaborate backstory that I could easily transform into several plot points, but others gave me hardly anything and might get disappointed when I cannot focus on their past the same way?
Okay. I have my opinions. I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. So I think there's 2 concerns here. One is how much your players have given you to work with, but another is how much do your players want you to involve their backstory. The reason you may not have gotten a lot from some of those players is because they don't care. Some players genuinely are not there to explore the backstory of their characters. They're looking forward. They're looking at the road in front of them. They want to see what open skies their ship is going to fly into, what strange new worlds and new civilizations they're going to explore, what dungeons are they going to delve, what is down that alley, what does their cyberpunk fixer have for them this week. They're not worried about talking about the things in the past of their characters.
Yep.
Others, like your wife's character. I had a discussion with her. I'm like, hey, I dedicated 4 sessions to going through, nothing but ripping apart your husband's character's soul. Would you how do you feel about, your character's involvement? And she was like, I don't really need it. But, it might be fun to delve into it for, a session or 2, but, I don't really need a huge thing. Just keep doing your plot, and if you want to throw something in for me as a B plot, that'd be good. So I did. In fact, we're going to be resolving that one this next game session.
Which is fantastic.
And things like that. And then, again, some want to look forward, some want to look backwards. Sometimes your backstory is there not to give you past skeletons to dig out and put in front of them, but to serve as a catalyst for future events.
Yep.
Okay? It's just there to say, X, Y, and Z happened to me in the past, and that's why I am the way I am.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
I don't need you to dig up, this old rival of mine or my childhood friend or anything like that. Just understand that that's where my motivations came from and put something in front of me that serves those motivations, that questions them or plays with them or allows me to use X, Y, or Z ability that I think is fun or whatever,
Yep.
That's it.
I agree with everything that you just said.
Yay!
I'm going to take a little spin
200 episodes.
200
we got
episodes.
Simpatico.
What I'm going to say is this. Reading through that, Miki, I would say, number 1, you have a plot that regardless of what your players are putting together, you should always have a meat and potatoes plot. Something simple. Your session 0 outlays what the world feels like, what the setting feels like, and what that simple paragraph plot should be for your players. When they hand you, one player hands you a novel, and 2 other players barely even get through a 20 questions or 5 questions or even bonds, they're just there for the loot, that is fine. because they don't know. They don't know their investment. And they may have no investment, or they may suddenly have investment after session 2. The point is that the history is there to be the sprouts and bulbs that pop up in the garden that you've just started. But you've already planted what you want to be there, what's out there for them to go and explore and discover. And every once along the line, something's going to pop up because it's interesting. But the only reason why it pops up is because a player helped you bring it about. It should always be that way. Anytime that you look at a character's history and you're like, oh man, he was he was the son of a noble who was deposed. Okay, that'll fit directly with my villain who is also deposed. Maybe that's his father, No, stop. Don't do that. Back it up. You're writing a book. Don't do that. They may not give two shits because their focus is that they wanted the noble background, and that was a way for them to get noble background in their mind. Or maybe they're 100% mimicking a character like, I don't know, Vash the Stampede, because they thought he was really cool. They don't care about his backstory because this isn't Vash in that world, this is Vash in this world, right? So they just mimicked something up, and now they're seeing what it's like in this world. Move forward. Help them move forward. Otherwise, you're just going to get a loop, and it will feel very dull to everyone else at the table. But if 4 sessions in, people are very interested in each other or very much exposing themselves, now you've got things to latch on to.
Please, there are ladies present.
That can fold into your plot and into that thread and keep things going. So, yes, it is great to have creativity that comes from the histories of the other players at the table, but inevitably you need to focus on the plot that you're presenting, the meal that you're bringing to the table. Always remember your meal. That's my point.
Well spoken.
Thank you. So, we have talked a lot because we have a show. Happy 200th.
Happy 200th, Rob.
So, our 201 is a system spotlight.
Yeah. So
we're finally coming to this one of all things.
Kind of excited because this one gets talked about so much in like RPG forums and stuff like that. It's like inevitably this game system is a little bit like the what are they called? Godwin's Law. Where like if a discussion thread goes on for long enough on the internet, inevitably someone will be compared to Hitler or called a Nazi or something like that.
Yes.
So this is kind of the Godwin's Law of RPGs as far as I'm concerned.
No, I remember the chart that was just like I want to play an RPG, and at the bottom of like after every of the 20,000 questions, it all points down to Blades in the Dark. And you're like, so I guess we're playing Blades in the Dark.
We are next week. We're finally getting around to talking about Blades in the Dark. And
something neither of us have played.
Yeah, it's basically a game about thievery and daring scoundrels and a fledgling crew and seeking fortunes in the haunted streets of an industrial fantasy city. So
yeah. So please come rejoin us for our 201 and continuing series on our way to our 300th episode.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for being along with us on the way. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. Shoot us some questions. Join us in the live chat for Patreon members. And we'd love to hear from you. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who help us out every single month and help us get through all 300 of these episodes. Knox of the Box, Subjet Sam, The Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Molson Veteran, who brought us a lovely cake, Hulavu, and Sean. We truly appreciate it. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/Arcane Anthems or on Instagram or on Spotify. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find them at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Mid-Air Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
And big shout out as always for families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables to give you these great stories to share with you. And you, every single one of our listeners who've been with us for 200 episodes. We love you guys so much.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.